Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Endeavor found Deku first. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not built for the weak. It was a lesson etched into the cracked pavement of Muzutafu, written in the towering skylines dominated by hero agencies, and screamed by the silence of those who fell through the cracks. Midoriya Izuku knew this lesson better than he knew the back of his own scarred hands. The mid-afternoon sun beat down on the black uniform of Aldera Junior High, making the fabric stick to his skin. It was a humid day, the kind where the air felt heavy enough to choke on, a grim precursor to the storm brewing in Izuku's chest. He walked with his head down, shoulders hunched forward in a practiced posture of invisibility. If you made yourself small enough, sometimes the world forgot to crush you. Sometimes. Today, however, the world had been particularly attentive. Izuku clutched the strap of his yellow backpack until his knuckles turned white. Inside, damp and smelling faintly of koi pond water, rested his lifeline. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. It was a testament to his obsession, a graveyard of ink and paper detailing the strengths and weaknesses of those blessed by the genetic lottery, and it was currently ruined. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Katsuki Bakugo's voice echoed in Izuku's mind, a jagged shard of memory that refused to dull. The explosion that had scorched the notebook's cover still ghosted heat against Izuku's palms. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life. Izuku stopped walking. He stood under the shadow of a pedestrian bridge, the concrete tunnel looming ahead like a dark mouth. The vibrations of the traffic overhead hummed in the soles of his red sneakers. He let out a shaky breath, forcing the tears that pricked the corners of his eyes to retreat. Crying wouldn't fix the notebook. Crying wouldn't manifest a quirk. Crying wouldn't make him matter. Stupid Kaken, Izuku muttered, his voice trembling. He kicked a loose pebble into the darkness of the underpass. You can't go around telling people to kill themselves. What if? He trailed off. The thought was a dark, intrusive thing that he quickly shoved into a mental box. He was stronger than that. He had to be. All Might wouldn't give up. All Might smiled in the face of adversity. Izuku forced the corners of his mouth up into a wobbly, pathetic imitation of the symbol of peace. It felt like wearing a mask that didn't fit. I have to look at the data, he whispered to himself, a coping mechanism he developed years ago. Analyze the problem. Ignore the emotion. Volume 13 is salvageable. The ink is waterproof. The pages are burnt, but legible. If I dry it out with a hair dryer on the low setting, I can preserve the binding. I need to retranscribe the page on Kamui Woods, though. His lacquer chain prison technique has a variation I noticed yesterday that involves preemptive anchoring. He was so lost in the comforting rhythm of his own muttering that he didn't hear the manhole cover slide open behind him. He didn't hear the wet, sickening squelch of fluid hitting concrete. He didn't realize he was no longer alone until the shadow swallowed him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The voice was gurgled, wet, and utterly inhuman. Izuku spun around, his eyes widening in terror. A wall of dark green sludge rose from the sewers, towering over him. Two manic, bulging yellow eyes floated in the viscosity, staring at him with a predator's hunger. Why you? Izuku stammered, stepping back. His heel caught on the pavement, and he scrambled to stay upright. You'll do, the villain hissed. The sludge surged forward like a tidal wave. Don't worry. I'm just going to take over your body. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds, then it'll all be over. Izuku tried to run. He tried to scream. But the villain was faster than fear. The sludge slammed into him, cold and smelling of sewage and rot. It forced its way into his nose and mouth, a suffocating blanket that tasted like death. Izuku's vision blurred. His hands clawed uselessly at the fluid, his fingers sinking into the muck without finding purchase. I can't breathe. Don't struggle, the villain crooned, the vibration of his voice resonating through the sludge filling Izuku's ear canals. It's better if you just let go. Thanks for the help, kid. You're a real lifesaver. I didn't think he'd track me this far. Izuku's lungs burned. His chest heaved, begging for oxygen that wasn't there. The edges of his vision began to turn black, speckling with white stars. Panic, primal and overwhelming, seized his limbs. He kicked, he thrashed, but he was drowning on dry land. Is this it? Is this how I die? No one knows I'm here. No one will find me until I'm just a husk. Mom. I'm sorry. His strength began to fade. His arms felt heavy, like lead weights. The villain's fluid body was forcing itself down his esophagus. Think, a small, desperate voice in his head screamed. Don't just die. Think. His hands, slippery and weak, stopped flailing and started searching. He wasn't strong enough to pull the villain off. The villain was a fluid type. Physical trauma was negated by viscosity shifts, but every fluid had surface tension. Every fluid had a density limit. Eyes. The eyes were solid. They had to be. They were maintaining a fixed shape amidst the chaos. With the last ounce of strength in his dying body, Izuku didn't push away. He reached in, his fingers curled, aiming for the yellow orbs floating above him. Stop that! The villain gurgled, shifting his mask to protect his eyes. The movement loosened the pressure on Izuku's mouth for a fraction of a second. It wasn't enough to breathe, but it was enough to hear the sound that changed everything. It wasn't the boisterous laugh of the number one hero. It wasn't the sound of wind rushing through the tunnel. It was the roar of a jet engine. It was the crackle of dry timber snapping under extreme heat. The temperature in the tunnel skyrocketed in an instant, turning the humid air into a blast furnace. Prominence. The voice was deep, imperious, and filled with a terrifying rage. The sludge villain stiffened. No! Not him! Anyone but. A wave of orange light flooded the tunnel, banishing the shadows with violent prejudice. Burn! A spiral of hellfire erupted from the tunnel entrance. It didn't wash over them, it struck with the precision of a scalpel and the force of a nuclear bomb. The heat was so intense that the puddles of water on the ground evaporated instantly into steam. The fire struck the sludge villain's main mass, missing Izuku by mere inches. The villain screamed, a high, bubbling shriek as his fluid body began to boil. The force of the thermal expansion blasted the sludge apart. Izuku was thrown backward, the slime releasing him as it frantically tried to reform, only to be consumed by the lingering flames. Izuku hit the concrete hard, rolling to a stop. He coughed violently, expelling the foul-tasting muck from his lungs. His throat felt raw, scorched by the proximity to the attack. He gasped, greedily sucking in the superheated air. Fire! Izuku's mind raced, even as his body trembled in shock. Controlled burst. High temperature, low spread. He targeted the villain's mass but avoided the hostage. The precision. He looked up. Standing at the mouth of the tunnel, framed by the blinding afternoon sun, was a titan. He was massive, broad-shouldered and imposing. Flames wreathed his face, forming a mask of pure power. His turquoise eyes burned colder than the fire that adorned his suit. He didn't smile. He didn't pose. He stood there with his hand extended, smoke rising from his palm, looking at the scattered remains of the villain with utter disdain. The flame hero, Endeavor. The number 2 hero. Izuku froze. This wasn't the comforting presence of All Might. This was raw, unadulterated power. This was a man who didn't save you because he loved you. He saved you because it was his job to destroy the threat. Endeavor lowered his hand, the flames on his suit flaring slightly as he exhaled. He stepped forward, his heavy boots clanking against the pavement. He ignored the whimpering remains of the villain, which were now just puddles of coagulated sludge trying to slither into the storm drain. Pathetic, Endeavor rumbled. He raised a foot and stomped on the largest puddle, creating a ring of fire that cauterized the sludge, trapping it in a circle of ash. Do not attempt to flee. You are already dried out. He turned his gaze to Izuku. Izuku flinched. Those turquoise eyes felt heavy, like they were weighing his soul and finding it wanting. You, Endeavor barked. Are you injured? Izuku tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He coughed again, wiping slime from his chin. I'm okay, Endeavor scoffed. You were nearly suffocated. Stay there. The police are en route. The hero turned away, seemingly dismissing Izuku entirely to focus on gathering the villain's remains into a more secure containment. It was over. Izuku was safe. He should be relieved. He should be thanking the hero, but Izuku's brain, flooded with adrenaline and the lingering terror of death, refused to shut down. The mutter started before he could stop it. It spilled out of him, quiet and frantic, a release valve for the trauma. He was a mutable liquid type, Izuku whispered, his eyes locked on the villain's steaming remains. Viscosity increases with stress, but heat disrupts the molecular bonds. Rapid evaporation caused a loss of cohesion. Endeavor, he didn't just burn him. He shocked the fluid dynamics. But the eyes? Endeavor paused. His back was to Izuku, but his head tilted slightly. Izuku, unaware he was being listened to, continued, his fingers twitching as if writing in an invisible notebook. The eyes were the anchor points. Solid matter amidst the fluid. If I had applied pressure to the optic nerve, the fluid reflex would have forced a retraction, creating a gap. He overcompensated on the left side when I reached up. Why? An injury? Or maybe the fluid density is lower there to allow for faster reformation? Endeavor's flame. It was approximately 800 degrees at the impact point, judging by the color, blue-white core. Boy! The single word cut through Izuku's muttering like a blade. Izuku snapped his mouth shut, clapping his hands over his lips. I am sorry. I have a bad habit of. I didn't mean to be creepy. Endeavor turned around slowly. The flames around his eyes flared, casting long, dancing shadows inside the tunnel. He walked back toward Izuku, towering over the boy who was still sitting on the dirty ground. You were analyzing the villain, Endeavor stated. It wasn't a question. While you were choking to death? Izuku trembled. I was trying to find a way out. I don't have a quirk, so I have to think. Quirkless, Endeavor repeated. The word usually carried a sneer when spoken by others. From Endeavor, it sounded like a diagnosis. And yet, you correctly identified that the eyes were his anchor. You noticed the density shift in his left flank. Izuku blinked, surprised. Why, yes, sir. When I struggled, the sludge moved slower on that side. I thought maybe he was hiding his core there, but... Endeavor stared at him. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and hot. For a moment, Izuku thought the hero was going to scold him for being reckless. Then, Endeavor's eyes drifted to the side. What is that? Izuku followed his gaze. Lying a few feet away, blown open by the force of the blast, was his notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. It was wet, charred, and pathetic looking. My notes, Izuku squeaked. Endeavor stepped past him and picked up the notebook. His large, gloved hand engulfed the spine. Wait. It's nothing. Just stupid rambling. Izuku scrambled to his feet, panic rising. If Endeavor saw what he wrote, if he saw the critiques, he'd be furious. Heroes didn't like being analyzed by nobodies. Endeavor ignored him. He flipped the notebook open. The pages were damp, but the ink held. He scanned the first page. Then the second. Izuku held his breath. Please don't look at page 40. Please don't look at page 40. Endeavor stopped. He had found page 40. Hero, Endeavor, Hellflame. The drawing was crude, but the text was dense. Strengths. Highest offensive output in Japan. Area denial. Intimidation factor. Weaknesses. Overheating leads to sluggish physical reaction time. Tunnel vision during high-stakes pursuit. Tendency to rely on brute force rather than environmental awareness, causing collateral damage that lowers rescue ratings. His temper makes his flame temperature fluctuate erratically, wasting energy. Endeavor read the words. His expression was unreadable. The flames on his shoulders flickered. Collateral damage, Endeavor read aloud, his voice low. Tunnel vision. Izuku wanted the ground to swallow him up. I wrote that a long time ago. I mean, not that long ago, but I was just observing from the broadcasts. I know you're amazing, sir. The number 2 hero. I didn't mean any disrespect. Silence. Izuku snapped his mouth shut, tears welling in his eyes. I'm dead. He's going to incinerate me. Endeavor looked from the page to the boy. He looked at the trembling hands, the messy green hair, the oversized red shoes. He looked at the utter lack of power emanating from him. You have no quirk, Endeavor said again. No, sir, Izuku whispered, looking at his feet. And you wish to be a hero? Izuku's head snapped up. Yes. More than anything. I know. I know it's impossible. Everyone says so. Without a quirk I can't. I can't be like All Might. No, Endeavor said bluntly. You cannot. The confirmation hit Izuku harder than the sludge villain had. Hearing it from a pro-hero, from the number 2, felt like the final nail in the coffin. You cannot be All Might, Endeavor continued, his voice cold and analytical. You cannot punch through buildings. You cannot leap over mountains. If you tried to fight a villain like this without support, you would die. You are weak. Izuku's shoulders slumped. I know, but, Endeavor said, closing the notebook with a snap. Izuku looked up. You saw the density shift, Endeavor said. I did not notice that until I applied the heat. You saw it while you were dying. He tapped the notebook against his armored palm. And this assessment of my thermal regulation is annoyingly accurate. Izuku stared, dumbfounded. Tell me, boy. What is your name? Midoriya. Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya. Endeavor loomed over him. Power is not the only metric of a hero. It is the most important, yes. But power without direction is chaos. All Might is a blunt instrument. He saves people with a smile and a punch. But he is inefficient. Izuku bristled slightly at the insult to his idol, but he was too terrified to interrupt. I have a son, Endeavor said abruptly. Izuku blinked. Oh. Todoroki. Shoto? I've heard rumors. He is my masterpiece, Endeavor said, his eyes narrowing. He possesses a quirk that surpasses even my own. He has the potential to stand above All Might. To be the undeniable number 1. Endeavor's face darkened. But he is rebellious. He refuses to use his power correctly. He lacks vision. He is consumed by childish defiance. He has all the power in the world, but he refuses to think. Endeavor looked at Izuku. He saw something in the boy that he hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't potential for strength. It was desperation. And desperation, Endeavor knew, was the most malleable metal in the world. You want to be a hero, Midoriya? Endeavor asked. You want to save people? Yes, Izuku breathed. You can't do it with your body. You are frail. But this, Endeavor pointed the notebook at Izuku's head, this is dangerous. You dissected my weakness from a few news clips. You dissected a villain while he was eating you. Endeavor took a step closer, the heat radiating off him intense but controlled. I have no use for another sidekick who simply follows orders. I have plenty of those. What I need is a variable. A variable? Shoto needs a handler, Endeavor said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl. He needs someone to see what he refuses to see, someone to point out the openings he ignores because he is too busy sulking. He needs a tactician. A strategist. Someone to be his eyes so he can focus on being the fist. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Are you offering me a job? But I'm in middle school. I am offering you a path, Endeavor corrected. You want to be a hero? Fine. But you will never be the symbol. You will never be the one they cheer for. You will be the shadow that guides the light. You will be the reason the number 1 hero wins. Endeavor held the notebook out to him. Become Shoto's support, Endeavor commanded. I will train you. Not to fight like me, you'd break in a day, but to survive. To command. To analyze. In exchange, I will ensure you have a place at UA High. Izuku stared at the notebook. A place at UA. A chance to be a hero. Even if it wasn't the hero he dreamed of being. Even if it meant living in the shadow of someone else. Can I do it? Izuku thought. Can I really give up on being All Might? But then he remembered the look in his mother's eyes when she apologized to him. He remembered Bakugo's explosions. He remembered the feeling of helplessness. Endeavor wasn't offering him a dream. He was offering him a weapon. He was offering him worth. Izuku reached out, his hand trembling. He grabbed the notebook. The leather cover was warm from Endeavor's hand. I'll do it, Izuku whispered. Then, louder, with a sudden surge of resolve that surprised even himself. I'll do it! I want to be a hero. Even if I'm just the guy in the chair, I want to save people. Endeavor's lips curled into a smirk. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had just acquired a valuable asset. Good, Endeavor said. We begin tomorrow. Do not be late, Midoriya. The Todoroki estate is not forgiving to those who waste time. The sirens wailed in the distance as the police finally arrived. They found the number 2 hero standing guard over a secured villain, and a small, green-haired boy sitting on the curb, clutching a burnt notebook like it was a holy scripture. Izuku watched Endeavor deal with the police. The hero was efficient, curt, and commanding. He didn't wave to the crowd that was forming. Izuku looked down at his hands. They were still shaking, but the terror was fading, replaced by a strange, cold clarity. Shoto Todoroki, Izuku thought, his mind already beginning to turn, pulling up the limited data he had on the reclusive son of the flame hero. Ice and fire. A dual quirk. Rare. Potential for thermal shock is high. If he refuses to use his fire, he risks hypothermia and frostbite. Why would he refuse? Trauma? Spite? Izuku opened his notebook to a fresh, damp page. His pen hovered over the paper. He needs a tactician. Izuku began to write. He wrote down everything Endeavor had said. He wrote down his own feelings. And then, he wrote a new header. Subject, Todoroki Shoto. Objective, number 1. For the first time in his life, Izuku didn't feel like a Deku. He didn't feel useless. He felt like a variable. And variables could change the entire equation. The walk home felt different. Usually, Izuku walked with the weight of the world on his shoulders, his feet dragging as he dreaded the question his mother would inevitably ask. How was school? Today, the weight was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't a crushing burden anymore. It was a responsibility. A heavy, terrifying, golden responsibility. He bypassed the main streets, taking the scenic route along the riverbank to clear his head. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange, colors that reminded him too much of Endeavor's flames. As he walked, his phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Sludge villain apprehended by Endeavor. No casualties. Izuku stared at the screen. No mention of the quirkless boy who had nearly died. No mention of the distraction that had allowed Endeavor to strike. Just the victory. That's how it's going to be, Izuku murmured to the flowing water of the river. I'm going to be invisible. He thought about All Might. The smile. The charisma. The sheer presence. He had worshipped that ideal his entire life. He had wanted to be the pillar that held society up. But Endeavor had shown him the cracks in the pillar. Tunnel vision. Collateral damage. Inefficiency. Maybe. Izuku tightened his grip on his backpack straps. Maybe the pillar needs someone to check the foundation. He reached his apartment complex just as the streetlights flickered on. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, composing his face. He couldn't tell Inko everything. She would worry herself to death if she knew he was involved with a villain attack, let alone making deals with the number 2 hero. He opened the door. I'm home, Izuku. Inko Midoriya rushed into the hallway, her face pale. I saw the news. There was a villain attack near the school. Are you okay? You're late. She fussed over him, checking for injuries. She saw the soot on his uniform and gasped. I'm fine, Mom, Izuku said, forcing a smile. It was easier this time. I saw it happen. From a distance. But I'm okay, Inko sighed, her shoulders sagging with relief. She hugged him tight, tears leaking from her eyes. Oh, thank goodness. You scared me, Izuku. You know you have to be careful. The world is dangerous for people like us. She didn't say it, but the words hung in the air. I know, Mom, Izuku said into her shoulder. He pulled back, looking her in the eyes. But I'm going to be okay. Actually, I have some good news. Inko blinked, wiping her eyes. Good news? I met someone today, Izuku lied, or told a half-truth. A mentor. He thinks I have potential. For you, Inko froze. A shadow of pain crossed her face. Izuku baby. Yue? You know the General Studies department is very competitive, and, not General Studies, Izuku said, his voice firm. Heroics. Inko's face crumbled. Izuku, please. Don't do this to yourself again. It's different this time, he insisted. It's not about a quirk. It's about strategy. Analysis. Support. The hero I met, he said, my mind is my weapon. He's going to train me. Inko looked at her son. She saw the soot on his face, the dampness of his hair, but more importantly, she saw the fire in his eyes. It wasn't the manic, desperate hope he usually had. It was a grounded, cold determination. Who? She whispered. Who told you this? Izuku hesitated. If he said endeavor, she might faint. Or forbid it. Endeavor was controversial. Intense. A pro, Izuku said. A top pro. He's going to send over the permission forms tomorrow. It's an internship, sort of. Inko searched his face for a lie, but found only resolve. She sighed, a long, trembling sound. You won't give up, will you? No. Okay, she whispered, stroking his cheek. Okay. If a pro hero thinks you can do it, then I believe in you. Just, please don't get hurt. I won't, Izuku promised. I won't be the one fighting, Mom. I'll be the one winning. That night, Izuku didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, surrounded by his All Might figurines, feeling like a traitor in a shrine. He had opened a new notebook. He spent hours scouring the internet for everything he could find on the Todoroki family. It was scarce. Endeavor kept his private life locked down tight. Todoroki Shoto. Age 15. Quirk, half cold, half hot. He found a single, grainy photo from a gala 3 years ago. A boy with bicolored hair, white on the right, red on the left, standing behind his father. He wore a tuxedo, but his expression was haunting. A burn scar marred the left side of his face. His eyes were mismatched, gray and turquoise, and they were filled with a cold, simmering hatred. Izuku stared at the photo. He looks lonely, Izuku thought. He looks like I feel. Endeavor wanted a handler. He wanted a tool to make his son compliant. Izuku picked up his pen. Endeavor thinks I'm going to be his puppet, Izuku thought, his eyes narrowing. He thinks because I'm quirkless, I'll be grateful for scraps. He thinks I'll just do whatever he says to keep my spot. He looked at the analysis he had written of Endeavor earlier that day. The weaknesses. The temper. The inefficiency. You want a tactician, Endeavor? Fine. You'll get one. Izuku sketched a diagram of the UA entrance exam structure based on previous year's data. He started calculating point distributions. He started listing support items he would need to request. I'm not doing this for you, Izuku decided, looking back at the sad, angry boy in the photo. I'm going to save him. And then, we're going to surpass you. The clock struck 3 a.m. Izuku closed the notebook. The cover read Project Genesis. Tomorrow, he would walk into the lion's den. Tomorrow, he would enter the Todoroki estate. He was quirkless. He was weak. He was a Deku. But for the first time, the name didn't feel like an insult. Deku, he thought, recalling a different reading of the kanji he'd toyed with in his head. Not useless. But one who can do it. Or perhaps, in this new light, something else. Data. He turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. But in his mind, the fire was just beginning to burn. The address Endeavor had given him belonged to a district Izuku had only seen in architectural magazines. It was a part of Mizurufu where the noise of the city died away, replaced by the hush of high walls, manicured pine trees, and old money. Izuku stood before the gate of the Todoroki estate, feeling distinctly like a smudge of dirt on a pristine painting. He adjusted the collar of his school uniform, which felt too tight, and gripped the straps of his yellow backpack until his fingers ached. The gate was massive, made of dark, heavy wood reinforced with iron, topped with a tiled roof that looked older than Izuku's entire bloodline. Beside the gate, a sleek, modern intercom panel buzzed with a low electronic hum, the only sign that this feudal-era fortress existed in the 21st century. Breath in. Breath out. It's just a house, Izuku whispered to himself. It's just a house where the number 2 hero lives. And his scary son. And probably a small army of sidekicks. He swallowed hard and pressed the buzzer. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a click. State your business. The voice was automated, robotic. And Midoriya Izuku, he squeaked, then cleared his throat and tried for a lower register. Midoriya Izuku. I was told to come here by Endeavor. The lock disengaged with a heavy thunk that vibrated to the ground. The small side door integrated into the main gate clicked open. Izuku stepped through. The transition was jarring. Outside, it was a bustling Tuesday afternoon. Inside, the world was still. The path ahead was lined with stone lanterns and perfectly raked gravel. A traditional Japanese garden spread out to his left, complete with a koi pond that likely cost more than Izuku's apartment. The main house was a sprawling traditional structure, vast and imposing, with wide endowa porches and shoji screens. But what struck Izuku most wasn't the beauty. It was the temperature. Even here, in the open air of the garden, it felt warmer than the street. It wasn't the sun. It was the ambient, dry heat that seemed to radiate from the very timber of the house, as if the building itself was holding its breath to keep a fire contained. You're late. Izuku jumped, nearly dropping his bag. Standing on the porch, arms crossed, was a woman. She had white hair with flecks of crimson, glasses, and a kind, albeit anxious, face. She wore casual clothes, a cardigan wrapped tight around her despite the warmth. I'm sorry. Izuku bowed rapidly. The train was delayed, and I had trouble finding the right turn, and I'm joking, she said softly, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Father is in the dojo. He hates waiting, but you're actually 5 minutes early. She stepped down into her sandals and walked over to him. I'm Fuyumi. Shoto's sister, Midoriya. Izuku introduced himself, shaking her hand. Her skin was cool. It's an honor to meet you. Fuyumi looked at him, really looked at him, with a mixture of curiosity and pity. You're the one he found? The analyst? I guess so. You're young, she murmured, half to herself. She glanced back at the house, a shadow crossing her face. Please, Midoriya-kun, just do what he says. And try not to antagonize Shoto. It's been a bad week. Izuku felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. A bad week? Father is intensifying the training, was all she said. Come. I'll take you to him. The interior of the house was a labyrinth of polished wood and sliding doors. It smelled of tatami, expensive incense, and faintly of ozone, the smell of lightning or burnt air. It was silent, not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a waiting room before a diagnosis. Fuyumi led him to a large set of double doors at the far end of the west wing. He's inside, she whispered. Good luck. She retreated quickly, the sound of her socks sliding on the wood fading away. Izuku was alone. He knocked. Enter. Izuku slid the door open and stepped inside. It wasn't a dojo in the traditional sense. It was a cavernous hall with high ceilings. The floor was covered in mats, some of which were scorched black, but along one wall, clashing with the traditional aesthetic, was a bank of high-definition monitors, servers, and a sleek metal desk. Endeavor stood in the center of the room. He wasn't wearing his hero costume, but his casual wear, a tight black compression shirt and martial arts trousers, was almost more intimidating. Without the flames masking his face, his expression was starker, his scar-like features more pronounced. His muscles rippled as he ran through a slow, meditative kata, his movements snapping with terrifying power. Close the door, Endeavor commanded without stopping his motion. Izuku obeyed, the latch clicking shut. Endeavor finished his form with a sharp exhale that sent a wave of heat across the room. He grabbed a towel, wiped his face, and turned to Izuku. Sit, he pointed to the metal desk. Izuku scrambled onto the chair. It was an expensive ergonomic mesh chair, far more comfortable than the plastic ones at school, but Izuku felt like he was sitting in an electric chair. Endeavor walked over and leaned against the edge of the desk, looming over the boy. I have spoken to you, eh? Endeavor began, skipping pleasantries. Principal Nizu is eccentric. He was intrigued by the loophole I proposed. You will take the entrance exam in 10 months. You will apply for the hero course. However, your application will include a provision for support-style heroics, A subclause rarely used since the golden age of gadget-based vigilantes. Izuku's heart hammered. So, I can bring gear? Yes. Provided you build it or procure it yourself, and it is non-lethal. But that is the easy part. Endeavor's eyes bored into him. Passing the exam is meaningless if you cannot perform the function I hired you for. Endeavor tapped a key on the console. The bank of monitors flared to life. Shoto, Endeavor said. On the screens, footage began to play. It was security camera footage, high quality. It showed a boy, Shoto, in a training arena. He was younger in some clips, older in others. In every clip, he was fighting robots, drones, or hired sparring partners. And in every clip, the right side of his body was encased in ice. Glaciers erupted from his feet, freezing targets instantly. He moved with a fluid, deadly grace, sliding on ice paths, creating walls, impaling drones with icicles. But his left side was dead. He kept his left arm tucked close to his body, never extending it. He pivoted away from enemies to keep his left side protected, but never utilized it offensively. Tell me what you see, Endeavor demanded. Izuku leaned forward, his fear momentarily forgotten as the data took over. His eyes darted across the multiple screens, processing the movement, the timing, the physics. He's fast, Izuku muttered, his voice dropping into his characteristic drone. Reaction time is 0.2 seconds. Exceptional spatial awareness. The ice output is massive, likely limited only by his stamina and body temperature. But, he's unbalanced, Izuku said, pointing at the screen. Look at his center of gravity. He leans heavily on his right leg to anchor the recoil of the ice attacks. It creates a micro delay when he needs to strafe left. If an opponent attacks from his back left blind spot, he has to rotate 270 degrees to bring his right side to bear, instead of just using his left for a 90-degree counter. Izuku pulled a notebook from his bag, a new one, Project Genesis, and flipped it open. Also, the cold. Look at his breath in the later clips. He's shivering. As the fight drags on, his movements become stiffer. The ice creeps up his own skin. He's giving himself hypothermia. If he fought a villain with high endurance, he'd freeze himself solid before he won. Endeavor's expression didn't change, but the air in the room grew hotter. Continue. He's fighting with one hand tied behind his back, Izuku said, looking up at the pro-hero. Literally and metaphorically. He's predictable. An intelligent enemy would just bait out the ice, wait for his core temperature to drop, and then strike his left flank. He's rejecting half of his own potential. Precisely, Endeavor growled. The sound was like grinding stones. Endeavor pushed off the desk and paced the room. He refuses to use his fire. My fire. He believes it is a rebellion. He believes that by becoming number one using only his mother's ice, he can deny my legacy. Endeavor stopped and looked at a monitor where Shoto, shivering and covered in frost, was knocked down by a training bot because his legs were too numb to dodge. It is a childish tantrum, Endeavor spat. He is limiting himself to spite me. I do not care about his feelings, Midoriya. I care about results. If he does not use the fire, he will never surpass All Might. All Might does not have limits. All Might does not freeze. Endeavor turned to Izuku. Your job is not to be his friend. I have bought him friends before. He ignores them. Your job is to be his mirror. You will find every flaw, every opening, every mistake he makes because of his stubbornness, and you will expose it. You will make him realize that his rebellion is nothing more than strategic suicide. Izuku looked at the screen, at the boy who was freezing alone in a room. You want me to bully him into using his fire? Izuku asked quietly. I want you to make him perfect, Endeavor corrected. How you do it is up to you. But if you fail, if you remain useless, then our agreement regarding UA is void. The threat hung heavy in the air. I understand, Izuku said. Good. Endeavor checked his watch. He is in the courtyard. Go. Introduce yourself. Do not expect a warm welcome. Izuku found Shoto in the back courtyard, a secluded area surrounded by high walls and bamboo. The sound of a shurshuro-doshi, a bamboo deer scare, clacking against stone was the only sound. Shoto was sitting on the engawa, staring at the sky. He wore a simple gray shirt and dark trousers. His bicolored hair swayed slightly in the breeze. Izuku stopped a few meters away. Up close, the burn scar over Shoto's left eye was confronting. It was a violent mark on an otherwise perfect face. Excuse me? Shoto didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He just lowered his gaze from the clouds to the garden. You're the new one, Shoto said. His voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. It was colder than the ice Izuku had seen on the screens. I'm Midoriya Izuku, Izuku said, stepping closer. Your father. He hired me to help with your training. Shoto let out a short, dry huff of air. A laugh without humor. He finally turned to look at Izuku. His mismatched eyes, one gray, one turquoise, scanned Izuku with utter disinterest. Help? Shoto repeated. He hired a quirkless nobody to be my sparring partner? Or are you just here to carry my water? Izuku stiffened. I know I don't have a quirk. But I'm not here to carry water. Then why are you here? Shoto stood up. He was taller than Izuku, radiating a subtle chill that made the hair on Izuku's arms stand up. Did he pay your parents? Did he promise you money? Whatever he gave you, it's not worth it. Just take the cash and leave while you can. He didn't pay me, Izuku said. He offered me a chance to be a hero. Shoto's eyes narrowed. A hero? Quirkless? He shook his head, turning away. He's delusional. And you're an idiot for believing him. Leave me alone. Shoto started to walk away. You lean too much on your right leg, Izuku blurted out. Shoto stopped. In the footage, Izuku continued, his voice trembling but persistent. When you use your ice ridge, you anchor entirely on your right side. It takes you 0.4 seconds to recover your balance. A speed-type villain would capitalize on that gap and take you out before you could blink. Shoto turned around slowly. The air around him dropped 10 degrees. Frost began to creep across the wooden floorboards beneath his right foot. You've been watching me? Shoto whispered dangerously. I've been analyzing you, Izuku corrected, clutching his notebook. You're strong. Maybe the strongest student in Japan right now. But you're sloppy. Sloppy? Shoto stepped off the porch, crushing the grass beneath his boots. You, who have zero power, are calling me sloppy? I'm calling you inefficient. Izuku insisted, backing up a step as the cold grew more intense. You're fighting half a battle. You're getting hypothermia in extended combat because you won't regulate your body temperature. It's illogical. Shoto's face twisted into a scowl. It's none of your business. You sound just like him. Did he give you a script? No. I wrote this myself. Izuku held up the notebook. Look, I don't care about your dad. He scares the crap out of me. But if you want to be a hero, if you want to save people, you can't be freezing to death halfway through a disaster. What happens if you have to save someone and your arms are too numb to lift them? Shoto stared at him. The logic was sound. That was what made it irritating. I don't need your advice, Shoto said coldly. He raised his right hand. And I don't need a handler. A wave of ice erupted from the ground, surging toward Izuku. It wasn't a lethal attack. It was meant to scare, to trap, to push him away. But it was fast. Faster than anything Izuku had ever faced. Think, Izuku didn't run away. He didn't scream. He watched the ice. Right foot anchor. Low trajectory. It's a ground wave. Izuku threw himself to the left. Not backward, left. Into the blind spot he had identified earlier. He hit the dirt, rolling awkwardly, grass staining his uniform. The ice rushed past where he had been standing, crystallizing into a jagged spike. Izuku scrambled to his feet, panting. He was unharmed. Shoto froze. He looked at his hand, then at Izuku. He had missed. He never missed against amateurs. You dodged, Shoto said, genuinely surprised. I told you, Izuku gasped, dusting himself off. You overcommit to the right. You telegraphed the attack with your shoulder drop. Izuku stood up straight, his knees shaking but his eyes defiant. I can't punch through walls. I can't shoot fire or ice. But I can see things you're ignoring. I can help you, Todoroki. Not for your dad. For you. Shoto lowered his hand. The ice on the ground steamed in the afternoon heat. He looked at Izuku with a complex expression, annoyance, confusion, and perhaps a flicker of begrudging respect. Midoriya, Shoto said, testing the name. You're annoying. I get that a lot, Izuku admitted. Go home, Shoto said, though the venom was gone from his voice. I'm done training for today. Shoto walked back inside, leaving Izuku standing next to a jagged pillar of ice. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and slumped against the porch. His heart was racing a mile a minute. I survived, he thought. And he listened. Maybe just for a second. But he listened. The weeks that followed settled into a grueling routine. Every day after school, Izuku took the train to the Todoroki estate. He would spend the first hour in the analysis room with Endeavor, reviewing pro-hero fights, villain takedowns, and Shoto's daily sparring sessions. Endeavor was a harsh teacher. He didn't tolerate stuttering or hesitation. He demanded conciseness. Too slow, Endeavor would bark as Izuku tried to explain a villain's weakness. The villain has already killed 3 civilians while you were explaining the physics. Give me the kill shot. Now, joints. Izuku would yelp. His armor has gaps at the joints. Better. Then came the physical training. Endeavor didn't train Izuku personally for this part. He hired specialists. A retired Special Forces instructor taught Izuku how to fall without breaking bones, how to roll, how to use momentum against larger opponents. You are small, the instructor told him. You are weak. If you try to block a punch from a villain, your arm will snap like a twig. So don't be there when the punch lands. Izuku learned to run. He learned to hide. He learned to use flash grenades, smoke bombs, and capture tape. He wasn't becoming a warrior. He was becoming a ghost. And then, there was the time with Shoto. It was the hardest part. Shoto was a wall of silence. He tolerated Izuku's presence in the dojo, mostly because Endeavor forced it, but he rarely spoke. Izuku would sit on the sidelines, notebook in hand, calling out corrections. Guard your left. You're relying on the ice wall too much. Check your 6. Sometimes Shoto listened. Sometimes he deliberately did the opposite just to spite Izuku. But slowly, painfully, a dynamic began to form. One evening, about a month into the arrangement, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It was dinner time. Endeavor usually ate alone or ignored the children, but tonight he had summoned everyone to the main dining hall. Izuku was invited to stay. It felt like a trap. They sat on cushions around a low table. The meal was exquisite. Sashimi, miso soup, pickled vegetables, but it tasted like ash in Izuku's mouth. Endeavor sat at the head of the table. Shoto sat to his right, Fuyumi to his left. Izuku sat opposite Endeavor, feeling like he was on trial. There was an empty seat next to Fuyumi. No one mentioned it. Shoto, Endeavor said, breaking the silence. His voice boomed in the quiet room. Your time trial results today were acceptable. You shaved 2 seconds off your best time. Shoto didn't look up from his rice. I just wanted to get it over with. However, Endeavor continued, his eyes narrowing. You are still hesitating against fire-type drones. You flinch. I don't flinch, Shoto muttered. You do. Endeavor slammed his chopsticks down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Fuyumi jumped. Izuku froze. Do not lie to me. Midoriya saw it too. Didn't you, Midoriya? All eyes turned to Izuku. Izuku felt the sweat trickle down his back. This was it. The test. Endeavor was using him as a weapon against his son. If he agreed, he alienated Shoto. If he disagreed, he defied Endeavor. Izuku looked at Shoto. Shoto was glaring at his bowl, his knuckles white. Izuku started, his voice wavering. He took a deep breath. He hesitated because the drones were programmed with a pursuit pattern that mimics, aggressive parenting. The silence that followed was deafening. Endeavor stared at Izuku. His left eye twitched. Explain. The drones, Izuku said, speaking faster now, terrified but committed. They corner him. They use overwhelming heat to force a reaction. It triggers a defensive reflex. It's not tactical hesitation, sir. It's psychological. Increasing the heat won't fix it. It just reinforces the trauma response. Fuyumi stared at Izuku with wide, terrified eyes. Endeavor slowly turned his head to look at Izuku. The air in the room began to shimmer. Are you psychoanalyzing my training methods, boy? I'm analyzing the data. Izuku squeaked, holding his ground. You want efficiency? Trauma is inefficient. If Shoto is stressed, his cortisol levels spike, his fine motor control drops, and his decision-making slows down. If you want him to be faster, you have to back off. Shoto looked up. For the first time, he looked directly at Izuku with something other than annoyance. He looked shocked. Endeavor stared at Izuku for a long, agonizing minute. The heat coming off the man was palpable. Izuku felt like his eyebrows were going to singe. Then, Endeavor huffed. A dismissive snort. Cortisol, Endeavor muttered. He picked up his chopsticks. Fine. Adjust the drone parameters for the next session. Lower the aggression. If his times do not improve, we return to my method. He went back to eating. Izuku slumped, exhaling a breath that felt like it had been held for an hour. Under the table, Fuyumi's hand brushed his knee briefly. A silent thank you. Shoto didn't say anything. He didn't thank Izuku. He didn't smile. But for the rest of the meal, he didn't look at his bowl. He looked at the empty space where his fire should be, deep in thought. After dinner, Izuku was packing his bag in the foyer, ready to leave. Midoriya. Izuku turned. Shoto was standing in the hallway, half in shadow. Todoroki-kun, Izuku said. I hope I didn't make things worse. Shoto walked over to him. He stopped a few feet away. Why did you do that? Shoto asked. He could have fired you. Or worse. Because it was the truth, Izuku said simply. And, because nobody else tells him the truth. Shoto studied him. You're weird. You're quirkless. You're terrified of him. But you talk back. I'm more terrified of being useless, Izuku admitted. He hoisted his backpack onto his shoulders. I'm not doing this for him, Todoroki-kun. I meant what I said. I want to be a hero. And helping you. That's my first mission. Shoto looked at the scar on his own face, reflected in the darkened glass of the front door. He calls you a variable, Shoto said. I know. He thinks you're going to make me use my fire. I know, Izuku repeated. I won't, Shoto said firmly. I will never use his power. Izuku looked at him. He didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He just smiled, a sad, knowing smile. It's not his power, Shoto, Izuku said softly, using his first name for the first time. It's yours. But we can figure that out later. Izuku opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. See you tomorrow, Todoroki-kun. The door clicked shut. Shoto stood in the hallway for a long time. He raised his left hand. He stared at it. It's yours. He clenched his fist. A tiny wisp of smoke curled from his fingers, which he instantly suppressed with a layer of frost. Idiot, Shoto whispered. But there was no heat in the word. Izuku walked to the train station, his legs feeling like jelly. He pulled out his phone and opened a new file in his notes app. Subject, Shoto Todoroki. Status, defensive walls cracking. Strategy update. He responds to logic and defense, not aggression. He needs an ally, not a rival. Izuku looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, All Might was saving people. Somewhere, villains were plotting. And here, in the shadow of the number 2 hero, a quirkless boy was playing a game of 4D chess with the most dysfunctional family in Japan. I'm going to get into UA, Izuku vowed to the night. And I'm going to drag Shoto across the finish line with me. He didn't notice the dark figure watching him from the rooftop of a nearby building. A figure with a long tongue and a stain-covered scarf, eyes narrowing as he observed the boy leaving the Endeavor estate. But that was a problem for another day. Today, the variable had survived. Time was a crucible. It burned away the unnecessary, leaving only the essential. For Midoriya Izuku, the last 10 months had been a slow, methodical immolation. The boy who had wept in the tunnel under the sludge villain was gone, or at least, buried deep beneath layers of calluses, bruises, and data. The seasons had turned outside the high walls of the Todoroki estate. Cherry blossoms had fallen, the cicadas of summer had screamed and died, and now the crisp, biting wind of February rattled the bamboo in the garden. Izuku sat in the center of the dojo, his chest heaving. Sweat dripped from his chin, staining the tatami mat dark. His hands were wrapped in white tape, already fraying at the knuckles. Again, the instructor barked. Kara-sensei was a man made of wire and scar tissue. A former underground hero whose quirk allowed him to mute sound, he was Endeavor's answer to Izuku's lack of power. If you cannot scream, Kara had said on day one, you must ensure no one hears you die. Or better yet, ensure you are never in a position to die at all. Izuku scrambled to his feet. His legs burned with lactic acid. He wasn't building the bulky, heroic muscle of all might. He was building the lean, twitch fiber muscle of a prey animal that had learned to hunt back. Attack me, Kara commanded, standing perfectly still, his eyes closed. Izuku didn't hesitate. Hesitation was a variable that led to failure. He lunged, low and fast. He didn't aim for a punch. He knew he couldn't hurt Kara. He aimed for the center of gravity, a grapple he had studied in Volume 4 of his hero analysis, used by the hero Eraserhead. Izuku's fingers brushed Kara's GI. In a blur of motion, the world flipped. Izuku hit the mat with a breathless thud. Kara's knee pressed gently but firmly into his sternum. You telegraphed, Kara said dispassionately. You shifted your weight to your left foot before the lunge. A villain like Stain would have gutted you before you left the ground. Izuku wheezed, tapping the mat. Kara released him. I was trying to leverage the... Izuku gasped for air. Analysis is useless if your body cannot keep up with your brain, Kara stated, offering a hand. Izuku took it, pulling himself up. But you are getting faster. 10 months ago, you would have tripped over your own feet. 10 months ago, Izuku wiped his face with a towel. I thought heroes just punched things really hard. And now? Izuku looked at his taped hands. Now I know that punching is just the end result of 1,000 micro-decisions. The door to the dojo slid open. The temperature in the room rose instantly. Enough physical conditioning, Endeavor's voice boomed. The number 2 hero stood in the doorway, a tablet in his hand. He looked at Izuku with critical, turquoise eyes. You have schoolwork to finish, and Shoto has sparring. To the study? Izuku bowed to Kara. Thank you, sensei. Don't die, kid, Kara muttered, which was the closest the man ever got to affection. The study was a misnomer. It was a war room. The walls were lined with screens, books, and Izuku's own notebooks, now professionally bound and digitized. Project Genesis had expanded into 3 volumes. Izuku sat at his desk, the glow of the monitors illuminating his face. Across the room, Shoto sat in an armchair, reading a book, ostensibly ignoring them. But Izuku knew better. Shoto was listening. He was always listening. The entrance exam is in 1 week, Endeavor said, pacing the room. The practical exam for the hero course traditionally involves robotics. Why? To avoid legal liability for student-on-student injury, Izuku answered instantly, not looking up from his screen where he was running simulations. And to test raw power output. It biases the exam toward emitters and mutation types with high destructive capability. Correct. It is a flawed system, Endeavor grunted. How do you intend to pass it without a quirk? Izuku pulled up a schematic. The robots are mass-produced. They have shielded CPUs, but their joined hydraulics are exposed to allow for range of motion. I don't need to destroy them. I need to disable them. He pointed to the screen. I've modified the support gear request. Flash grenades to confuse optical sensors. High-tensile capture tape to bind the treads. And a collapsible alloy staff to leverage the joints. You are relying on tools, Endeavor noted skeptically. I am the tool, Izuku corrected, a phrase Endeavor had drilled into him, though Izuku had repurposed its meaning. The staff is just an extension. Besides, the exam isn't just about villain points. There are rescue points. Endeavor stopped pacing. Explain. It's a secret metric, Izuku said, tapping his temple. I analyzed the acceptance data from the last 5 years. There's a statistical anomaly. Students with low destructive power but high tactical utility still get in. UA values altruism. If I coordinate the other examinees, if I create openings for them, I generate rescue points. I don't need to be the cannon. I need to be the general. Endeavor stared at him. A slow, terrifying smirk touched his lips. Good, he rumbled. You are finally thinking like a Todoroki. Across the room, Shoto slammed his book shut. The sound was sharp, like a cracking glacier. I'm going to the dojo, Shoto said coldly, standing up. This conversation is boring. He walked out, the air chilling in his wake. Endeavor's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. He is still resistant. He dominates the sparring bots, but he refuses to innovate. Go watch him, Midoriya. Find me a flaw I can exploit to break his stubbornness. Izuku grabbed his notebook. I'll find a flaw, sir. But I think breaking him is the wrong terminology. Do not lecture me on terminology, Endeavor snapped, the flames on his shoulders flaring. Just do your job. The dojo was silent except for the sound of ice shattering. Shoto was moving through a high-intensity drill. 4 drones hovered around him, firing rubber bullets at high velocity. Shoto didn't dodge. He simply raised his right hand, and a wall of ice erupted from the floor, blocking the projectiles. With a flick of his wrist, he sent spikes of ice shooting outward, skewering the drones midair. It was impressive. It was powerful, and it was boring. Izuku stood by the wall, watching. He had seen this routine 100 times. Shoto was a fortress. Nothing got in, and ice came out. You're bored, Izuku called out. Shoto didn't turn. He exhaled a breath of white mist. I'm training. You're stagnating, Izuku said, walking onto the mats. He wasn't wearing his school uniform anymore. He was in his workout gear, track pants and a compression shirt that showed the definition he'd earned over the months. You know exactly where the drones are going to be. You know the ice will stop the bullets. There's no risk. Shoto turned, wiping sweat from his brow. His scar stood out starkly against his pale skin. And what do you suggest? Should I ask him to turn the heat up again? No, Izuku said. He dropped his notebook on the floor. Spar with me. Shoto blinked. He looked at Izuku, then at the notebook, then back to Izuku. You want to go to the hospital before the exam? I'm serious, Izuku said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. No quirks for me. Just you and your ice. If you can tag me, you win. If I can put you on the floor, I win, Shoto scoffed. Midoriya, I can freeze this entire room in 3 seconds. Then do it, Izuku challenged. But you won't. Because you're afraid of losing control. You're afraid that if you use too much power, you'll become him. So you use just enough. Calculated. Predictable. Shoto's eyes narrowed. The temperature dropped. Predictable? Prove me wrong. Shoto raised his right hand. The attack was instantaneous. A glacier surged across the mats, a jagged wave of white aimed straight at Izuku's chest. But Izuku was already moving. He always starts with a frontal wave. Right foot plant. Shoulder dip. Izuku didn't run away. He ran forward, diving into a slide. He hit the polished wood just to the right of the ice wave's path, the cold air biting at his cheek. He scrambled up, closing the distance. Shoto looked surprised, but he adjusted quickly. He stomped his foot, sending a localized burst of ice spikes radiating outward to create distance. Zone defense. He wants me back. Izuku grabbed a discarded training staff from the rack on the wall as he dodged backward. He used the staff to vault over the low spikes, landing in a crouch. Stop running! Shoto shouted, frustration leaking into his voice. He fired a barrage of ice shards like a shotgun blast. Izuku spun the staff, deflecting the largest shards, and took a hit to the shoulder from a smaller one. It stung, cutting the skin, but he ignored it. He's getting annoyed. His breath is quickening. Frost is forming on his right arm. I'm not running! Izuku yelled back. I'm analyzing. Shoto growled and unleashed a massive wave, covering the entire width of the dojo. There was nowhere to dodge left or right. Verticality. Izuku ran at the wall, planting his foot on the wooden panels and pushing off, flipping over the leading edge of the ice. He was airborne. For a split second, he hung in the air above Shoto. Shoto looked up. His right side was covered in frost. His left side was untouched, unguarded. He's slow. The cold is slowing his synapses. Shoto raised his hand to blast Izuku out of the air, but his arm jerked. The ice was stiffening his joints. Izuku landed. Not on Shoto, but inside his guard. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He hooked his leg behind Shoto's right ankle, the anchor leg, the one bearing all the weight of the ice. With a sharp twist of his hips, Izuku swept the leg. What? Shoto's balance, compromised by the heavy ice on his right side, vanished. He tipped backward. Izuku dropped the staff and grabbed Shoto's collar, pulling him down to accelerate the fall, then rolling over him. Thud. Silence returned to the dojo. Shoto lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling beams. Izuku was straddling him, breathing hard, his forearm pressed lightly against Shoto's throat. Shoto blinked. The ice on his arm crackled softly as he moved. You! Shoto whispered. You tripped me. You rely on your quirk to keep people away. Izuku panted, sweat dripping from his nose onto Shoto's shirt. You think the ice is a wall. But walls don't move. Once I got past the wall, you didn't know what to do. Shoto lay there, processing. He could freeze Izuku right now. He could blast him off. But he didn't. For the first time in his life, someone had beaten him without a quirk. Someone had beaten him with nothing. Get off me, Shoto said, but there was no malice in it. Just shock. Izuku rolled off and collapsed on the mat next to him, staring at the ceiling. Ow. My shoulder hurts. I hit you with an icicle, Shoto pointed out. Yeah. That was mean. They lay there in silence for a long moment, the adrenaline fading. You called me predictable, Shoto said quietly. You are, Izuku said. You use your right side for everything. Attack, defense, mobility. It makes you lopsided. Your left side, it's a blind spot the size of a billboard. I won't use it, Shoto said automatically. I know, Izuku turned his head to look at him. But Shoto, you're freezing yourself. I could feel the cold coming off you when I pinged you. Your reaction time was down by almost half a second. If I had a knife, or if I was a villain. I know, Shoto interrupted. His voice sounded tired. I know. Izuku sat up, wincing as his shoulder throbbed. Endeavor wants you to use the fire to beat All Might. To be his legacy. Shoto sat up too, brushing frost from his sleeve. I'm aware of his ambitions, but I don't care about his legacy, Izuku said firmly. He looked Shoto dead in the eye. The mismatch of gray and turquoise met the emerald green. I'm not doing this for him, Shoto. I'm doing this because I want to be a hero. And I want you to be a hero. Not a tool. Not a masterpiece. Just a hero who doesn't die of hypothermia at age 20. Shoto looked at Izuku. Really looked at him. For months, he had seen Izuku as another pawn. A clever pawn, sure. An annoying pawn. But still, something Endeavor had brought in. But pawns didn't fight back. Pawns didn't trip kings. Pawns didn't look at you with genuine, painful concern. You really think you can pass the exam without a quirk? Shoto asked, changing the subject, but the softness in his tone was answer enough. Izuku grinned. It was a sharp, confident grin, not the wobbly smile of the past. I've got flashbangs and a stick. And I've been sparring with the strongest student in Japan for 6 months. I think I'll be okay. Shoto let out a breath that might have been a laugh. You're arrogant. I'm informed. The door slid open again. Endeavor stood there. He looked at the melted ice on the floor. He looked at Izuku holding his shoulder. He looked at Shoto, who was sitting on the floor, not training. What is the meaning of this? Endeavor demanded. Izuku scrambled to his feet. Just testing a hypothesis, sir. About close-quarters combat engagement zones. Endeavor looked at Shoto. And? Shoto stood up slowly. He looked at his father, then at Izuku. He won, Shoto said simply. Endeavor's eyes widened slightly. He won? He exploited a gap in my defense, Shoto said, walking past his father toward the exit. I need to shower. And I need to rethink my guard stance. Endeavor watched his son leave, then turned his burning gaze on Izuku. You defeated him? I tripped him, sir. He wasn't expecting me to be aggressive. Endeavor stared at Izuku. A deep, rumbling sound emerged from his chest. It was a laugh. A terrifying, satisfied laugh. Excellent, Endeavor grinned, the flames on his face roaring higher. You have humiliated him. You have shown him that power is nothing without vigilance. This will drive him. This will make him hungry. Izuku forced a nod. Yes, sir. But as Endeavor turned away, muttering about training schedules, Izuku looked at the door where Shoto had exited. It wasn't humiliation, Izuku thought. It was a wake-up call. And he didn't wake up angry. He woke up curious. The night before the exam, the apartment was quiet. Inko was asleep, though Izuku knew she had spent the last hour pacing nervously. Izuku sat at his desk. The hero analysis notebook, the one Endeavor had found in the sludge, sat on the shelf, preserved in a plastic cover. Next to it sat Project Genesis Volume 4. He opened his backpack. Flash grenades. Check. Capture tape, carbon fiber reinforced. Check. Collapsible alloy staff, weighted for balance. Check. Grappling hook launcher, pneumatic. Check. First aid kit. Check. He picked up a small, sleek device. A voice modulator. He had built it with parts scavenged from the Dagoba Municipal Beach trash heap. Old habits died hard, and refined with Endeavor's resources. It could amplify his voice to shout orders over the roar of battle. He wasn't going to Yuri to punch robots. He was going to Yuri to command an army. His phone buzzed. From Shoto. Don't embarrass me tomorrow. If you fail after tripping me, I'll never let you live it down. Izuku smiled. It was the first text Shoto had ever sent him first. To Shoto, I won't fail. See you at the finish line. He put the phone down and looked at his reflection in the window. The boy staring back wasn't the trembling victim from 10 months ago. His eyes were sharper. His jaw was set. He carried the weight of the number 2 hero's expectations, and the secret burden of saving the number 2 hero's son. He wasn't All Might's successor. He wasn't the symbol of peace. He was the variable. He was the tactician. I'm ready, Izuku whispered to the darkness. He turned off the light. Bonus scene, the shadow. From the rooftop of a building overlooking the city, a figure crouched on a gargoyle. Stain, the hero killer, sharpened his blade. The metal sang against the whetstone. He had been watching. Not just the false heroes who pranced for cameras, but the undercurrents. He had heard rumors of Endeavor's new project. A quirkless boy. A pet. Endeavor. Stain rasped, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. You corrupt everything you touch. You breed power for the sake of power. And now you drag the innocent into your filth. He sheathed the blade. I will see what this boy is made of, Stain decided. If he is another puppet, he will bleed. But if he is a true hero, Stain disappeared into the night, a shadow hunting shadows. The golden gates of Yui High School towered over the students like the entrance to Olympus. They were less a barrier and more a declaration. Beyond this point lies the future. For most of the hundreds of teenagers streaming through the archway, this moment was the culmination of a lifetime of dreaming. They walked with their chests puffed out, corks flaring, sparks dancing on fingertips, skin hardened to stone, extra limbs twitching with nervous energy. They were the chosen, the gifted, the powerful. Midoriya Izuku walked among them, but he did not puff his chest. He walked with the silent, rolling gait of a predator moving through tall grass, a habit beaten into him by Kara-sensei over 6 months of hellish CQC, close-quarters combat, training. He wore the standard Aldera Junior High uniform, but beneath the black gakurin, his body was taped and braced. His backpack didn't hold pencils and erasers. It held a tactical arsenal authorized under UA. Bylaw 14, Section C, the clause for non-biological support aptitude. Out of the way, extras. The voice was a growl, familiar and jagged. Izuku didn't flinch. He knew the cadence of those footsteps. Katsuki Bakugo shouldered past a group of trembling students, his eyes fixed on the main building with predatory focus. He looked bigger than he had a year ago, his confidence swollen to near bursting. Then he stopped. Bakugo turned, his red eyes locking onto Izuku. The sneer on his face faltered, replaced by a look of genuine confusion that quickly curdled into rage. Deku? Izuku stopped. He adjusted the strap of his bag. Good morning, Kaken. What the hell are you doing here? Bakugo stomped over, smoke already curling from his palms. The spectator entrance is on the other side. Or are you just here to sell concessions? I'm taking the exam, Izuku said calmly. His heart was hammering against his ribs. Fear was a reflex that never fully went away, but his face remained impassive. Endeavor had taught him that. Show them nothing. Ha! Bakugo leaned in, his face inches from Izuku's. You don't have a quirk. You can't take the exam. Did you hit your head and forget how reality works? I applied, Izuku said, sidestepping Bakugo to keep moving toward the entrance. And they accepted the application. Excuse me, I don't want to be late for the orientation. He walked past. Bakugo stood frozen for a second, his brain trying to process the defiance. The old Deku would have stammered. The old Deku would have flinched. This Deku just walked away. Don't ignore me, you damn nerd! Bakugo roared, spinning around. I'll kill you! If you think you can embarrass me by dying in the practical, I'm not going to die, Izuku called back over his shoulder, his voice amplified slightly by the acoustics of the archway. I've done the math. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving a fuming Bakugo behind. The written exam. The written portion was a slaughter, but not in the way the other examinees expected. While students around him chewed their pencils and sweated over quadratic equations and hero law ethics, Izuku worked with machine-like efficiency. The questions were difficult, designed to weed out the unintelligent, but Izuku had spent the last 10 months analyzing the psychological profiles of villains and the physics of disaster zones under the tutelage of the number 2 hero. Question 45. A villain with a localized gravity well quirk has taken hostages in a suspension bridge scenario. The structural integrity is at 40%. Prioritize your actions. Izuku wrote, 1. Neutralize the gravity well to prevent structural collapse, priority over hostage extraction due to catastrophic failure risk. 2. Establish counterweight using support beams. 3. Engage villain from below to minimize vibration. He finished 30 minutes early. He spent the remaining time meditating, slowing his heart rate, visualizing the schematic of the battle centers he had memorized from public records. The orientation. Everybody say hey. Present Mick's voice was a sonic boom that rattled the teeth of everyone in the auditorium. The heroes stood on the stage, backlit by massive screens, radiating charisma. Welcome to my live show. Today, you bunch of listeners are going to be experiencing a 10-minute mock city battle. The screen flashed, displaying the silhouettes of robots. You'll be split into battle centers A through G. You can bring whatever gear you want, as long as it was registered. Izuku sat in the middle row, his hand resting on his bag. He was in Battle Center B. He glanced at his exam ticket. Bakugo was in A. Good. They were separated. There are 3 types of faux villains. Present Mike shouted. 1 pointers are fast but weak. 2 pointers are tanks. And 3 pointers are pure firepower. Earn points by disabling them. Excuse me, sir. A tall boy with glasses and engines in his calves stood up. Tenya Ida? Izuku recognized the Turbo Hero family name immediately. The handout clearly lists 4 types of villains, Ida said, chopping his hand through the air. If this is a misprint, it is a shameful error for you, eh? And you, Ida spun around, pointing a finger directly at Izuku. You've been muttering under your breath for the entire presentation. It's distracting. If you're here to sightsee, please leave immediately. The auditorium went silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to Izuku. Izuku felt the heat rise in his cheeks. Old habits. He had been mumbling about the specific alloy composition of the 3-pointer's chassis. Slowly Izuku stood up. He didn't look at Ida. He looked at Present Mike. I apologize for the noise, Izuku said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. However, regarding the 4th villain type, is it safe to assume it acts as an environmental hazard rather than a combatant? A 0-pointer designed to test retreat protocols? Present Mike blinked behind his sunglasses. He grinned. Bingo! That listener gets it. The 4th villain is the arena trap. It's worth 0 points. If you see it, run away. It's not there to be fought. Ida looked from Mike to Izuku, stunned. He bowed stiffly. I see. Thank you for the clarification. He sat down. Izuku sat down as well. He could feel the eyes on him. Who is that guy? Someone whispered. I heard he's quirkless. Quirkless? Then what's with the gear bag? Maybe he's a transfer from a military school. Izuku stared at the screen. 0-pointer. massive size. Indestructible by standard student means. Avoidance is the logical strategy, unless, he shook his head. Focus. Stick to the plan. Battle Center B. The mock city was enormous. It was a perfect replica of a downtown district, complete with office buildings, paved streets, and traffic lights. A crowd of students gathered at the massive metal gates. They were stretching, hyping themselves up. Izuku stood near the back, adjusting his belt. He had changed into a dark green tactical tracksuit with reinforced elbows and knees. Around his waist was a utility belt heavy with pouches. Strapped to his back was a telescoping staff made of a titanium carbide alloy. On his eyes he wore a pair of protective goggles with a heads-up display that linked to a wrist-mounted sensor suite. Endeavor didn't skimp on the budget. Hey, Izuku looked up. It was a girl with a round face and brown hair. Ochako Uraraka. She looked nervous. You're the boy from the auditorium, she said. That was cool. How you figured that out? It was just a deduction, Izuku said, checking the seal on his smoke grenades. Good luck out there. Thanks. I'm Uraraka. Start. President Mick's voice screamed from the observation towers. The students froze, confused. There was no countdown. What are you waiting for? Mike yelled. There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 While the others hesitated, Izuku was already moving. He sprinted. He wasn't the fastest runner physically. He didn't have engines in his legs, but he had reaction time. He burst past the stunned crowd and dashed through the opening gates. First blood, he whispered. A one-pointer, a one-wheeled drone with sniper arms, rolled out from behind a convenience store. It locked onto him. Target acquired. Flash! Izuku shouted. He grabbed a small sphere from his belt and threw it. It wasn't a random toss. He banked it off the wall so it detonated right in front of the robot's optical cluster. Bang! A blinding white light erupted. The robot screeched, its sensors overloaded. It spun wildly. Izuku didn't stop running. As he passed the disoriented bot, he drew his staff. He didn't hit the armor. He jammed the end of the staff into the exposed wheel axle and levered it upward with all his momentum. Crunch! The wheel popped off its track. The robot toppled over, sparks flying, immobilized. 1 point, Izuku muttered, retrieving his staff and continuing down the street. Behind him, the rest of the students finally surged in, screaming battle cries. The observation room. In a dark room lined with monitors, the UA faculty watched. A vigorous crop this year, Midnight purred. They have spirit, Cementos agreed. But spirit isn't enough. Look at Center B, Snipe pointed a gloved finger. Who is the kid in the green? On the screen, Izuku was moving like a blur. He wasn't overpowering the robots. He was dissecting them. He used a roll of capture tape to bind the treads of a two-pointer, causing it to crash into a wall. He used a grapple gun to swing around a corner, baiting a three-pointer into firing its missiles at a one-pointer. Midoriya Izuku, Aizawa Shota said, reading from a file. His eyes narrowed. Quirkless. Quirkless? All Might, standing in the back in his skeletal form, hidden from most, leaned forward. Young Midoriya? He requested permission for support items. Nizu, the principal, chirped happily. Endeavor sponsored the request. It seems the number 2 hero has taken a personal interest. He fights like a pro, Vlad King noted. No wasted movement. He's targeting sensors, joints, power cables. He's not destroying them. He's disabling them. Efficient. But is it heroic? Midnight asked. He looks like a soldier. Aizawa watched the screen intensely. In a crisis, a soldier saves lives just as well as a hero. Maybe better. The battlefield, 10 minutes in. Izuku was panting. Score, 28 villain points. It wasn't enough. The other students were destroying robots left and right with massive explosions and flashy quirks. He couldn't compete with raw DPS damage per second. He was in an alleyway, catching his breath, when he heard a scream. Help! My leg! Izuku peeked around the corner. A boy with a laser naval quirk was pinned down by 3 two-pointers. He was panicking, firing lasers wildly into the sky. Izuku checked his belt. 2 flashbangs left. Half a roll of tape. I need points. But he needs help. Izuku didn't hesitate. He tapped his headset. Hey! Laser guy! Izuku shouted, his voice amplified by the modulator to sound booming and authoritative. The boy looked around. Who's there? Stop firing blindly. At my mark, fire a beam at the ground in front of you. Create a dust cloud. Why should I do it? Izuku commanded. The boy flinched but obeyed. He fired a laser at the asphalt. Debris and smoke exploded upward. The robots paused, their visual tracking obscured. Izuku dropped from the fire escape above. He landed on the back of the center robot. He jammed his staff into the gap between the head and the chassis, prying open the maintenance panel. He ripped out a handful of wires. The robot powered down instantly. Izuku leaped off as the robot slumped. He rolled to the boy's side. Get up, Izuku said, grabbing the boy's arm. Can you run? My ankle. Fine. Izuku turned to the remaining two robots emerging from the smoke. Hey! Izuku yelled at a girl running past, the one with the acid quirk. Melt their feet. They can't turn if they're fused to the road. Mina Ashido blinked, then grinned. Got it, boss. She slid in on a stream of acid, melting the asphalt beneath the robot's treads. They churned and stuck, immobilized. Laser guy, finish them. Izuku ordered. Target the heads. Zap. Zap. The robots exploded. Whoa, Ashido panted. Nice call, Greenie. Keep moving, Izuku said, checking his watch. 2 minutes left. He didn't take credit for the kills. He didn't get the points. But he felt a surge of something hotter than adrenaline. Rescue points, he hoped. Please let that count. The 0-pointer. The ground shook. It started as a vibration in the soles of Izuku's boots, then escalated to a localized earthquake. Buildings groaned. Glass shattered. At the end of the main thoroughfare, the pavement exploded upward. A hand the size of a bus slammed onto the road. Then another. The 0-pointer rose. It was colossal, a monstrosity of green metal that blocked out the sun. It towered over the skyscrapers. Its single red eye glowed with the intensity of a dying star. It's huge! Run! Everyone run! The students broke. Panic, raw and unfiltered, swept through the crowd. They turned and fled, trampling over debris in a desperate bid to escape the gimmick. Izuku turned to run with them. It was the logical choice. It was worth 0 points. There was no strategic value in engagement. Run. Survive. Pass. He took 3 steps away. Oh wow! The sound was faint under the roar of the robot's tracks, but Izuku heard it. He stopped. He looked back. Uraraka Ochako was trapped. A piece of falling masonry had pinned her leg. She was struggling, face pale with terror, directly in the path of the behemoth. The 0-pointer raised a fist, ready to crush the street flat. Izuku's mind went blank. The data vanished. The strategy vanished. Endeavor's voice vanished. All that was left was the image of a person who needed saving. Izuku turned around. He tapped his headset. Requesting immediate assist. Civilian trapped in Sector 4. No answer. Everyone was running. Izuku grit his teeth. He sprinted toward the robot. I have no quirk. I have no super strength. I can't punch it. He reached Uraraka. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Run! She screamed. Not without you. Izuku grabbed the slab of concrete. He pulled. It didn't budge. It was too heavy. The shadow of the robot fell over them. Think, Izuku. Think. You are a variable. He looked at his belt. The pneumatic grappling hook. He looked at the robot. The hydraulic pistons on its legs were exposed, venting steam. He looked at Ida, who was running away but looking back with a conflicted expression. Ida? Izuku's amplified voice boomed across the chaos, sounding like the voice of a god. Ida froze. Get over here! Izuku roared. I need an engine. It was a command so absolute, so filled with conviction, that Ida's body moved before his brain could object. He drifted the corner, engines roaring, and sprinted back toward danger. Midoriya-kun! Ida yelled. The slab. Izuku pointed. Lift it. Use your torque. Ida grabbed the concrete. Recipro. Burst. With a scream of engines, Ida heaved. The slab lifted 3 inches. It's not enough. Ida strained. The robot was almost on top of them. The dust from its tracks was choking them. Izuku grabbed his staff. He jammed it under the slab, using a piece of rubble as a fulcrum. Leverage! Izuku screamed. 1, 2, 3. Izuku pushed down. Ida pulled up. Uraraka scrambled free, her leg dragging. Clear! Uraraka sobbed. Go! Izuku grabbed her arm, throwing it over Ida's shoulder. Ida, get her out of here. Maximum speed. But what about you? Ida yelled. The robot's fist was coming down. Izuku looked up. He pulled the last item from his belt. A high-yield sonic disruptor grenade, highly experimental, meant for breaking glass. I'll buy you 2 seconds. Ida nodded, grabbed Uraraka, and bolted. A streak of blue light. Izuku stood alone before the god of metal. He didn't punch. He fired his grappling hook. The hook bit into the metal plating of the robot's wrist as it descended. The winch screamed as it retracted, pulling Izuku toward the fist. If you can't block the force, ride it. Izuku flew through the air, narrowly missing being crushed as the fist slammed into the ground, obliterating the spot where they had been standing. The shockwave rattled his bones. He landed on the robot's arm. He scrambled up the metal limb, fighting the G-force. He reached the elbow joint. A mass of sensors and hydraulics. He pulled the pin on the sonic grenade and jammed it into the cluster of wires. Eat this. He kicked off the arm, free-falling toward the street. Boom. The grenade didn't destroy the robot. But the high-frequency pulse shattered the glass lenses of its sensors and disrupted the gyroscopes in the arm. The zero-pointer lurched. It listed to the side, confused, its targeting system rebooting. Izuku hit the ground. He rolled. He kept rolling. He slammed into a mailbox. Everything went black for a second. Then, the buzzer sounded. Time's up. The aftermath. The dust settled. Izuku lay on the pavement, staring at the sky. His body felt like one giant bruise. His support gear was trashed. His staff was bent. Midoriya, Ida and Uraraka were running toward him. Ida looked shaken. Uraraka was crying. You're alive! Uraraka fell to her knees beside him. You saved me. You jumped at that thing. Did you get away? Izuku wheezed. Yes, Ida said, his voice thick with emotion. Because of you. You commanded me. I abandoned my post to run, but you stayed. You were the only one who stayed. Other students gathered around. They looked at the quirkless boy in the tactical gear with new eyes. They didn't see a weakling. They saw the guy who had stared down a mountain and barked orders at a speedster. Here, let me see. Recovery girl hobbled through the crowd. She looked at Izuku. Broken rib. Sprained wrist. Concussion, she listed, Tutang. And not a lick of a quirk to help you heal. Reckless, she kissed his forehead. A wave of exhaustion hit him, but she whispered brave. 1 week later, the Todoroki estate was quiet. Izuku sat in the study. Endeavor stood by the window, watching the sunset. Shoto sat in the corner, peeling an orange. The envelope sat on the desk. It was heavy. Open it, Endeavor commanded. Izuku tore the seal. A metal disc slid out. It projected a hologram. I am here. All Might appeared, in his Silver Age costume. Young Midoriya. All Might boomed. You did well to apply. The written exam? Perfect score. Impressive, Endeavor scoffed. Obviously. But the practical? All Might's voice dropped. 28 villain points. A low score. By combat standards you failed. Izuku's heart stopped. He felt cold. I failed. I knew it. The rescue points, they weren't enough. However, All Might leaned into the camera. A hero is not judged solely by the enemies he defeats, but by the lives he saves. In the final moments, with the zero-pointer looming, you did not run. You organized. You commanded. You sacrificed your safety for another. A video played. It showed Uraraka in the interview room, pleading with President Mike to give her points to Izuku. It showed Ida praising Izuku's leadership. The judges were moved. All Might shouted. Rescue points are given for acts of selflessness. And commanding a rescue operation under fire? That is the essence of heroism. The score counter appeared. Villain points, 28. Rescue points, 60. Total, 88. Midoriya Izuku. You pass. Welcome to your Hero Academia. The hologram faded. Silence in the room. Izuku stared at the empty space. Tears, big, fat, ugly tears, welled in his eyes. He didn't sob. He just let them fall. 88 points, Endeavor mused. Acceptable. You're in Class 1A. Shoto stood up. He walked over to Izuku and placed a hand on his shoulder. You did it, Shoto said. A tiny, almost invisible smile touched his lips. Partner, Aldera Junior High. The next day, the results were public. Izuku walked to his shoe locker. He felt lighter. The world felt brighter. Slam. His locker door was kicked shut. Bakugo stood there. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His hands were popping with explosions. DKU. Students scattered, terrified. How? Bakugo screamed, grabbing Izuku by the collar and slamming him against the lockers. How did a quirkless piece of trash like you get into the hero course? Did you bribe them? Did that fire bastard buy your way in? Izuku looked at Bakugo. He didn't tremble. He remembered the 0-pointer. He remembered the feeling of commanding Ida. He remembered Shoto's respect. Izuku grabbed Bakugo's wrist. He didn't squeeze hard, but the contact shocked Bakugo enough to make him pause. I didn't buy my way in, Kaken, Izuku said quietly, looking deep into Bakugo's red eyes. And I didn't get in by luck. Izuku leaned forward. I got in because while you were busy trying to be the strongest, I was busy learning how to be a hero. He shoved Bakugo's hand off. Get out of my way. I have class. Izuku walked past him. Bakugo stood there, vibrating with rage, staring at his own hand. For the first time, the explosion didn't trigger. He was too stunned. The shadow of the quirkless boy stretched long down the hallway, looking remarkably like a giant.